I'm going to illustrate what had happened to the gauge cluster in my Porsche 928. And I'm going to demonstrate here with this gauge out of a 1988 Porsche 944, which is very, very similar to the 928, which I'll show you right here. Here's the 928 gauge cluster. I already assembled it. Unfortunately, I probably should have done this test for you before I assembled it, but here's what we had. So on the gauge cluster in the 928, this needle here would be blocked to here. It would not go any higher than 5. But on this gauge, as you can see, it goes well beyond 5. Similarly, this one stops at around 0, just a little bit below 0, where my 928 was well below 0. And so what I did was I calibrated the needle, I moved the needle so that it would go about to there. I also checked the volt gauge on my 928 as well, and I noticed that at rest position, this needle here was well below 10 volts, and the maximum it would go was 14. It wouldn't go any higher. And as you can see here, this gauge goes all the way up to 16 and goes and stops at 10. So what I did was, since the mechanical movement was not quite aligned, I moved the range of the gauge, just pushed the needle so that it would top out here at 16 volts, just like this, and it would drop down to below 10. And so I'm going to show you my 928 gauges in their rest position. You can see the volt gauge sits right around just below 10, and the oil pressure gauge sits just below 0. Here, I'll pull this other gauge up for comparison. Okay. And the reason I did this is I noticed on the back, the two gauges use the exact same part numbers for the gauges themselves. Those round, silver, cylindrical things. The part numbers are exactly the same, even though the gauges are just slightly different. You can see on the 944 gauge, there's a little orange and red flick. How do I say that? Right here. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just fading of the paint, since that was probably behind the bezel. Anyways, there you go. Hope you enjoy.